position hasn't changed here on any of this. You're still all uniformly against the trucks-only tolls or any tolls. Is that correct?
Yes, I think both chambers are absolutely against any type of tolls whatsoever. And their toll plan, that there's no toll plan. Let's be clear. I'm not exactly sure what today was really about. They don't have a bill. They don't have a plan. They're saying it's changing as we talk. The revenue's going down. What is going on? Why is today drumbeat toll day for vote count? And admittingly, they don't have a plan. And admittingly, they're already reducing the numbers they're talking about. So I'm not exactly sure where they're going and what today was all about.
And when we heard they were caucusing today, we certainly also heard that there would be a vote count, which at least would be different than other days and other conversations about tolls. But as the senator and I both agree, we came in here and what we've heard of what they said today just seems to be a regurgitation of the past, except for the fact that the amount of money that they were anticipating to get in their first trucks only plan, which wasn't enough at the time, is now less. So, I would be interested to see what was different today than any other plan they had, but what hasn't changed from our perspective is we are still very strongly against tolls for all the reasons we've given before.
So, Glenn, are you saying based on what you heard them say, you're not sure whether they do have the votes? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, what I'm saying is, look, if they had the votes, they'd vote it. We all know how this building works. It's really simple. You have the votes, you vote. You don't have the votes and wait, you vote. Obviously, number one, they don't have a plan. They've admitted that to you today, that, well, we're not doing as many trucks as we thought. The number's between 150 and 175, and the numbers was upward of 187 or something like that. So they've already changed the plan, which means if you do that over 10 years, you're shorting that thing over a couple $1 billion. So they went from 21 billion down to 19 billion. I don't know where this number puts them. So they can't even vote count if you don't have a plan. What do you vote count? What you're asking the folks who are here to represent the state of Connecticut to do when you don't even present them with a plan of what you're doing. So I don't know exactly what all today was about.
Well, given the uncertainty in the Middle East, do you still think it's wise to take $1.5 billion out of the rainy day fund?
Hey, look, we're going to put $380 million on the volatility cap back into the rainy day fund. At the end of the day, even with the $28 million shortfall, and we've all heard Governor Lamont is talking about making some cuts, but even with the $28 million shortfall, we are going to be at $1.7 billion in our rainy day fund at the end of this fiscal year, 1.7 billion. And at the volatility cap, which they predict will come into play again next year, you're going to be over $2 billion in our rainy day fund. So we're going to have money. And the most we've ever taken out was in 2010, when we had the worst recession since the crash of 1929. But prior to that, or any other time, it's been 100 million, 200 million tops. So there is money in there if we react accordingly. And paying down debt is not a bad way of going about solving your fiscal problems in the state of Connecticut.
And I just, we've heard many times that the House will not take up tolls unless the Senate agrees to take up tolls. Then we hear the House will not take up tolls unless the Senate does it first. Then we hear the Senate doesn't necessarily believe the vote count downstairs is accurate. So there is an internal struggle in and of itself within the majority party in regards to this, or it wouldn't be January 2020 and we're still debating this. This is not just a this year thing, as all of you certainly well know. This has been going on for several years. And I think we all are in this room are still struggling to figure out what today was about. We've heard there would be vote counts. That would have made today different than other days, and that I would have understood. But the reality here is this. They are continuing to do budgets that spend more, that raise taxes, and that sweep rainy day, special transportation fund money, which they did in June. And yet they still want to come back and take more money out of your pocket. Show that you can be responsible with the money. It is not enough to say, oh, there's a $28 million deficit, we're going to make some cuts. We are way beyond make some cuts. Make some cuts should have happened 10 years ago. This should have been they wanted to show you that they wanted to use your money wisely, and if they wanted to show you that you could trust them, that the people of this state could trust them, they would have done a budget in June that was a responsible budget. not a budget that raised spending, raised taxes, and took money out of the very fund that they want to fund by raising tolls and raising revenue from tolls.
Len just said when you have the votes, you vote. So is that an endorsement of them voting in special session next week if they indeed have the votes?
Look, they're the majority. They could call us in for voting time they want on any subject matter that they want. There isn't much we can do about it. So, but the argument is that they're saying they have the votes. And my argument is, if you want to put it up, put it up. That's your, that since what? April of last year, March of last year. And we just have a plan that keeps changing every other day. It's a new plan. I'm sure there's going to be a public hearing on this. I doubt that they will ever do this without a public hearing, and that'd be interesting for us to see what's in there. But let's be clear, even if they just do large trucks, they were going to do classes 6, 7 up, that's tolling more trucks than Rhode Island is tolling. So they're going to be tolling more vehicles.
We're not talking class 8 up, is my information.
They're talking about class 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc.
As of 2 minutes ago, I'm told it's class 8 and up.
As of 2 minutes ago? If they're doing class 8 and up,
He's
I
still on that 4
would
minutes ago.
love to see those numbers.
Okay.
I would
I
love
would
to
too.
see. I would love to see the numbers and what the rate is,
Right.
and who's going to control the rate. I mean, there's a lot of questions that have not been asked on this plan. Is the rate going to go up? How much the rate is going to be? Because you cannot. It's once again the math that we've always talked about. You cannot say I'm tolling X number of trucks at this rate. That's what I'm doing. Then reduce the number of trucks dramatically. And this was a dramatic reduction, and somehow still say we're hitting our $20 billion figure. It doesn't make logic sense. And that's the reason why there should be a public hearing on whatever they're going to do so we all can see it. And not the bill the day before the public hearing, but an honest public hearing.
And remember, this, as much as we don't like this, this has nothing to do with us in regards to a vote on tolls. They have the votes to pass this any day they want. They have had the votes this year. They had the votes last year. Quite frankly, they've had the votes for the past 45 years to pass tolls if they chose to do it. So any conversation about what we have done or not done is a moot point in regards to this. They either have the votes or they don't. And if they have the votes, they vote. And if they don't, this is where we are.
Are either of you predicting that we will not see a vote in this chamber before the regular session starts in February? Or either of you saying, based on everything you know here, are you predicting there will be no vote?
I think it'd be extraordinarily difficult for them who just admitted a few minutes ago and just heard 2 seconds ago are changing their plan dramatically to have a plan drafted, shown to the public, a public hearing, and a vote before we go into session for our session. I find that to be on such an important issue. That would be fairly dramatic to ram it. And why do it in special session other than to get it over with before regular session starts, because they know it's a bad vote, they know the public is going to be upset about this vote, and they want to get it over with as soon as they can in hoping that people will forget about it in November 2020. And people will not forget about it when it gets to November 2020.
If they're unable to get this toll plan through, 12 truck-only bridge tolls, is tolls dead? I mean, if they can't line up the votes for this program, do you see them ever getting the votes for any tolls?
I mean, I have been shocked every time there's one toll plan that seems to be the silver bullet, according to them, and then that fails, and then there's another toll plan, and then that fails. But right before Christmas, they had a trucks-only toll plan that they thought was the answer to all the problems. And yet what we hear today is they've even changed that. So clearly, if they thought any of these plans, back to the votes, right? If any of these plans that they've put forward and presented to their caucuses had the votes, they would be voting on it. There's a reason that today's plan is even different than 3 weeks ago's plan.
Representative
Never
Klarides,
say
you're campaigning for the Republican
Enough.
candidate in the special election in the 48th Assembly District tomorrow, I believe, or sometime soon.
Yes.
Is this an issue in that race, given that there aren't any proposed tolls in that district?
I think it's an issue in every town in the state of Connecticut, because whether there's first of all, we don't ever know which toll plan we're working off of, because it changes so quickly. So I don't think anybody in the state that, as of today's toll plan, it may not affect theirs. Next week, it could affect theirs. So nobody's safe in this situation. That's been proven in the past 12 months with the variety of toll plans we've had.
And is that the emphasis that you will make in the campaigning for that candidate?
I mean, the emphasis we're going to make is the same emphasis we all make in regards to every town in the state. That back to, you have a state that is in a very bad fiscal situation, and you hear our colleagues on the other side say it on a daily basis, all the things we're doing to fix it. Yet they put out a budget that raises spending. That in and of itself. So what we're running on these 3 special elections, and quite frankly, what we'll be running on in November for any of our races, is this state has been run badly, this state continues to get worse, and most importantly, there has been trust lost for elected officials in the state of Connecticut.
But you do believe this issue will at least help you flip that district? Do you not?
Oh, I certainly do.
Can I ask you both about the issue of bond covenants? We're still hearing that's one of the things they may use for some cover, is say, we'll put in a bond covenant that this can never be expanded to cars. And we know in this biennial budget, we're paying $450 million less in the teacher's pension than the original schedule. About a decade ago, we had a bond covenant that said we'll never refinance the teacher's pension until 2033. Do you think the public is going to trust at all that a bond covenant will make any difference? And have you guys done any legal research into how much protection a bond covenant really offers?
So I guess I'll take a quick shot at this and say that if you put a bond covenant in and then you do something that can harm that bond covenant, then there's liability for breaching the bond covenant. You put a bond covenant in and you do something that doesn't breach that covenant but may be disrespected to that covenant, but there's no damage, no one's going to call you on it. So I'm not sure how much protection a bond covenant is, saying we're not going to do cars, for instance, when if you do cars, it might be a breach of that covenant, but what's the harm? The bond's being paid.
To the bondholders.
To the bondholders, exactly. So I would argue, Keith, that that is not a full protection at all, would be my argument.
And your average person doesn't even know what a bond covenant is, if they haven't dealt with it at their job or something in their daily life. What they know is we are putting in tolls in this state that will take more money out of their pocket, and saying it was 88 tolls, then it was 50 tolls, then it was 53 tolls, then it was 16, then it was trucks only, then it wasn't, and this has changed day in, day out. They know they do not trust the government of the state of Connecticut to keep their word. So they don't want to hear about bond covenants, schmond covenants. They don't know what that means, and they know they don't trust. They don't trust a bond covenant. They don't trust an amendment. They don't trust any of it because they don't trust the people that have been damaging the state of Connecticut because their word has never been kept.
Can you spell that? Bond covenant amendment?
You want it spelled?
M-O-N-N.
Not in the AP style.
Do you expect, you both talked about, or I think maybe Len, you were the one talking about getting something the day before, and how much advance notice do you expect legislators and members of the public to receive once they have a final?
This is a hot button issue for many people in the state of Connecticut. And this has been an issue that controlled last session. And I think it should be given a high priority of disclosure and fairness to the public, for them to have the opportunity to review it, an opportunity to come in and testify on the bill, and the opportunity for legislators to read it. Look, this is going to be a very complicated bill. This is not a straightforward bill. There's a when you look at the language that was drafted the last time, and it didn't have all the things we're talking about now, this is not a straightforward bill. So I think there should be ample time for people to read it, digest it, and then have a public hearing.
Sorry, Len, you're just gonna pull a mic out of it.
But do you think you'll get it?
We're going to demand it. And look, if that means we have to slow up the process for it to happen, you're damn sure we're going to slow up the process for it to happen. And how do you slow up the process? Is that the question?
Please explain. I think I have an idea.
So at the hearing, we're just going to make sure that everyone is heard and that the hearing is held at the appropriate time, and whatever procedures we have to do to make that happen, we're going to make sure that it happens. And if we have to hold hearings ourselves with our ranking members, we will hold hearings ourselves with our ranking members. But the people are gonna have a right to talk about this.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for